The young man walked into the bank, his step steady but his heart a little nervous. He was dressed casually, jeans, a plain shirt, and sneakers, but he carried himself with quiet confidence. In his hand he held a folder stuffed with papers, documents for a business loan he hoped would kickstart his dream. For years he'd been saving every penny he could, determined to turn his idea into reality. Today, he was finally taking the first big step. The bank wasn't particularly busy, just a few people waiting in line or sitting on chairs near the walls. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh paper, the kind of clean scent that made everything feel official. He approached the counter where a middle-aged woman sat behind a computer screen. She glanced up at him briefly before returning her focus to whatever she was typing. Her name tag read, S, just the initial, no full name. "Hi," he said, politely, placing the folder gently on the counter. "I'd like to open an account and ask about a business loan." She stopped typing and looked at him again, this time more slowly, as if sizing him up. Her eyes flicked over his clothes, then lingered on his face. There was something in her gaze, a mix of curiosity and judgment that made him shift uncomfortably. Still, he smiled, trying to stay friendly. This was important. His future depended on it. "What kind of business are you planning?" she asked, her voice flat, almost bored. He explained enthusiastically, leaning forward slightly. "It's a mobile app designed to help underserved communities access resources like job listings, affordable housing info, and educational tools. I've already saved $5,000 to get started, and I'm looking for funding to develop the platform further." Instead of responding with encouragement, or even basic professionalism, she raised an eyebrow. "5,000? That's not much," she said, her tone dripping with skepticism. "Are you sure you're ready for something like this?" Her words stung, but he nodded firmly. "Yes, ma'am. I've done my research and I have a solid plan." He opened the folder and slid out the neatly organized documents, his savings statements, a detailed proposal, market analysis, and letters of recommendation from mentors who believed in him. But instead of reviewing them, she barely glanced at the papers. Instead, she started firing questions at him, one after another. "Where do you work? How long have you had this job? Do you own any property? What's your credit score?" Each question felt heavier than the last, like she was building a case against him rather than helping him. When he handed over his ID, she took it hesitantly, holding it up to the light as though inspecting it for signs of forgery. "This doesn't look quite right," she muttered, loud enough for nearby customers to hear. A couple of heads turned in their direction, and he felt heat rise to his cheeks. Was she implying he wasn't telling the truth? That he didn't belong here? He clenched his fists under the counter, forcing himself to stay calm. Losing his temper wouldn't solve anything. But inside, he was seething. Why was she treating him this way? Would she be doing the same if he looked different? If he wore a suit instead of jeans? The thought crossed his mind, and it only deepened his frustration. As the interrogation continued, he couldn't shake the feeling that everyone around him was watching, not out of concern but out of morbid curiosity. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats, others whispered behind cupped hands. No one stepped in to say anything, though. It was as if they'd all silently agreed to let this awkward scene play out without interference. Little did he know, things were about to change in a way he never could have predicted, because just as he was starting to wonder if he should leave and try another branch, the glass doors of the bank swung open. And walking through them was someone who would alter the course of the day, and maybe even his life. The tension at the counter was thick enough to cut with a knife. The young man stood there, gripping the edge of the folder in his hand so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Each question from the bank teller felt like another weight being added to his shoulders. He tried to answer clearly and confidently, but it was getting harder to keep his composure. "Do you even have experience running a business?" she asked, her tone sharp and dismissive. "Because this isn't something you can just jump into." He swallowed hard, forcing himself to stay calm. "I've taken courses, worked on similar projects during college, and consulted with professionals in the field," he replied steadily. "I'm prepared for this." But she didn't seem convinced, Or maybe she didn't care. Instead of acknowledging his efforts, she leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms over her chest. You know, most people start small before they try something like this. Maybe you should think about saving more money first. $5,000 isn't exactly a fortune. Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. Saving more? He'd scrimped and sacrificed for years to put together that amount while working. Part-time jobs and juggling school. And now, after all that effort, she was implying it wasn't good enough. He glanced around the room, hoping someone might step in or at least offer a sympathetic look. But the other customers avoided eye contact, pretending not to notice what was happening. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others whispered quietly among themselves. It was as if they were watching a train wreck unfold, curious but unwilling to intervene. Then came the final straw. As she flipped through his documents again, almost lazily, she said, "Honestly, I'm not sure you're cut out for this kind of responsibility." Her voice carried just enough volume for those nearby to hear. A few heads turned toward them, curiosity written all over their faces. The young man felt his face flush with embarrassment. Responsibility? Did she really think he lacked that? He'd spent sleepless nights planning every detail of his project, poring over spreadsheets and brainstorming ways to make it work. He knew it wouldn't be easy, that nothing worth doing ever was. But he also knew he had the drive and determination to see it through. Still, no matter how much he wanted to defend himself, he couldn't find the right words. The frustration bubbling inside him made it hard to think straight. All he could do was stand there, feeling smaller and smaller with each passing second. And then, just when things seemed like they couldn't get any worse, the glass doors of the bank swung open with a soft whoosh. Everyone turned to see who had entered, including the teller. What happened next would change everything, for both the young man and the entire room. A tall, striking woman walked in, her presence commanding attention the moment she stepped inside. She wore a sleek navy blue blazer paired with tailored trousers, and her heels clicked against the polished floor with authority. Her posture was perfect, her expression unreadable but undeniably powerful. Even the teller froze mid-sentence, momentarily distracted by the newcomer's aura. The young man's eyes widened in disbelief. He recognized her immediately. It was his mom. They hadn't seen each other in months due to their hectic schedules, but here she was, walking into the bank like some kind of superhero arriving at the last possible moment. For a brief second, relief washed over him. Maybe, just maybe, things were about to turn around. But he quickly reminded himself to stay cautious. After all, he didn't want to assume anything, not yet. Still, there was no denying the shift in energy in the room. People sat up straighter, whispering stopped abruptly, and even the teller seemed unsure of herself for the first time since the interaction began. His mom approached the counter, her gaze moving between him and the teller. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. There was no anger in her tone, just an unshakable confidence that demanded respect. The teller stammered, caught off guard. No, ma'am. I was just assisting this customer with his request." Assisting? The young man nearly laughed out loud at the absurdity of that statement. If this was assistance, he'd hate to see what neglect looked like. But instead of saying anything, he kept quiet, waiting to see how his mom would handle the situation. She studied the scene carefully, taking in the scattered papers on the counter and the tense atmosphere. Then, without missing a beat, she reached for one of the documents and scanned it briefly. "These appear to be legitimate," she said coolly, addressing the teller directly. "And my son is more than capable of managing his finances." Her words hung in the air, silencing everyone, including the teller, whose mouth opened slightly as if she wanted to protest but thought better of it. The young man felt a surge of pride mixed with gratitude. For once, someone was standing up for him, refusing to let anyone diminish his worth. What happened next would leave a lasting impression, not just on him, but on everyone present. Because sometimes, life has a way of turning moments of humiliation into opportunities for redemption. And thanks to his mom's unexpected arrival, this was shaping up to be one of those moments. The room seemed to freeze as the young man's mom stood there, her presence radiating authority and calm. The teller, who had been so confident moments ago, now looked like a deer caught in headlights. Her hands fidgeted with the papers on the counter, her earlier bravado crumbling under the weight of this unexpected interruption. "Ma'am," she started, her voice shaky. "I was just trying to ensure everything is in order. We have protocols to follow." The woman raised an eyebrow, her expression unreadable but undeniably sharp. "Protocols?" she repeated slowly, as if testing the word. "Or biases?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unignorable. The moi teller opened her mouth to respond, but quickly closed it again. Unsure of what to say, she glanced around the room, perhaps hoping for some kind of support from her colleagues. But everyone else was too busy pretending not to watch. By now, the entire bank had noticed the commotion. Customers who had previously avoided eye contact were now fully invested, their attention glued to the unfolding drama. Some whispered behind their hands while others simply stared openly, fascinated by the sudden shift in power dynamics. Even the manager, a middle-aged man with thinning hair, hurried out of his office, alerted by the murmurs spreading through the space. The young man watched all of this silently, still processing the surreal turn of events. His mom hadn't even acknowledged him yet. Her focus was entirely on the teller, but he could feel a surge of relief washing over him. For the first time since he'd walked into the bank, he wasn't alone in this fight. His mom turned her gaze back to the teller, her tone firm but measured. "Let me make one thing very clear," she said, leaning slightly forward. "My son has worked hard to get where he is today. He's prepared meticulously for this meeting, and he deserves respect, not suspicion or condescension." The teller stammered, clearly flustered. I didn't mean any disrespect, ma'am. I'm just doing my job." "Doing your job?" the woman countered, her voice rising slightly but never losing its composure. "Your job is to serve customers, not interrogate them based on assumptions. If you had taken the time to review his documents properly instead of jumping to conclusions, you might have seen how serious and qualified he is." The young man felt a lump form in his throat. No one had ever defended him like this before, at least not in such a public setting. It was both humbling and empowering, knowing that someone believed in him so fiercely. He glanced at his mom, catching her eye for the first time since she'd arrived. There was warmth there, mixed with determination, and it gave him strength. At this point, the manager stepped in, his face flushed with nervous energy. "Madam, please allow me to assist you," he said, addressing the woman. "We take customer service very seriously here, and I assure you we'll address any concerns immediately." She turned to him, her piercing gaze softening only slightly. "Good, because this isn't just about my son, it's about how institutions treat people who look like him. Bias doesn't always come in the form of outright hostility. Sometimes it's subtle, like questioning someone's competence without cause or making them feel unwelcome. That's unacceptable." Her words struck a chord, not just with the employees but also with the customers watching silently. Several nodded in agreement while others exchanged knowing looks. It was clear that many had witnessed similar situations before, whether personally or vicariously, and seeing someone call it out so boldly was refreshing and long overdue. The manager, realizing the gravity of the situation, nodded vigorously. "Absolutely, madam. We will conduct a thorough review of our practices and provide additional training to our staff. This kind of behavior won't be tolerated." The young man couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. All those years of being told he wasn't good enough, that he didn't belong in certain spaces. Now, finally, someone was proving those voices wrong. And it wasn't just anyone. It was his mom, standing tall and unapologetic, refusing to let anyone diminish her son's worth. After a few more tense exchanges, the manager escorted the teller away, leaving the young man and his mom alone at the counter. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of what had just happened settled between them, mingling with the unspoken emotions they hadn't shared in months. Finally, she broke the silence. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, her voice filled with genuine concern. He nodded, though his eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Yeah, I'm fine, thanks to you." She reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder, squeezing gently. "You don't need thanks. You deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, no matter where you go or what you're doing. Don't ever forget that." Her words stayed with him long after they left the bank together. As they walked side by side, he realized something important. This wasn't just about one humiliating encounter at a bank counter. It was about resilience, representation, and having someone in your corner when the world tried to push you down. And for the first time in a long while, he felt truly unstoppable. After the intense confrontation at the bank, the young man and his mom stepped outside into the crisp afternoon air. The tension from inside the building seemed to lift as soon as they crossed the threshold, replaced by a sense of relief and maybe even a little triumph. For the first time that day, he felt like he could breathe again. His mom glanced at him, her expression softening now that they were away from the prying eyes of the bank staff and customers. "You hungry?" she asked with a small smile breaking the silence between them. He nodded, though it wasn't just food he craved, it was connection. It had been months since they'd spent any real time together, their busy lives pulling them in opposite directions. But today, fate, or maybe coincidence, had brought them back together in the most unexpected way, and he wasn't about to let this moment slip away without making the most of it. They walked down the street until they found a cozy cafe tucked between two larger buildings. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries greeted them as they entered. They chose a quiet corner table near the window, where sunlight streamed through the glass, casting golden patterns on the wooden surface. As they settled in, the young man couldn't help but notice how different his mom seemed here compared to her commanding presence at the bank. She looked more relaxed, almost approachable, a side of her he didn't often see. "So?" she began after ordering sandwiches and drinks, leaning forward slightly. "Tell me everything. What's this app idea you're working on?" He hesitated for a moment, unsure where to start. He'd spent so much time explaining his vision to others who doubted him that he almost forgot what it felt like to talk to someone who genuinely wanted to understand. Taking a deep breath, he dove in. "It's meant to connect underserved communities with resources they might not know are available," he explained, his voice growing steadier as he spoke. "Things like affordable housing listings, job opportunities, scholarships, mentorship programs, you name it. I want it to be a one-stop platform that empowers people to improve their lives." Her eyes lit up, pride evident in her expression. "That sounds incredible," she said sincerely. "It's ambitious, but it's also exactly the kind of innovation we need right now. Have you thought about how you'll market it, or how you'll scale once it takes off?" He blinked, surprised by her enthusiasm. Most people either dismissed his idea outright or offered vague encouragement without really engaging. But here was his mom, asking thoughtful questions and treating his dream like something tangible, achievable. It made him sit up straighter, eager to share more. "I've got some ideas," he admitted, pulling out his phone to show her mock-ups of the app interface. "I've been researching similar platforms and talking to potential users to figure out what features matter most. Once I secure funding, I can hire developers to bring it to life." She listened intently, nodding along as he spoke. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair, tapping her fingers lightly against the edge of the table. "You've clearly put a lot of thought into this," she said, "and I'm proud of you, not just for coming up with the idea, but for sticking with it despite the challenges." Her words hit him harder than he expected. He'd always known his mom supported him in theory, but hearing her say it aloud, especially after everything that had happened at the bank, meant more than he could put into words. "But let me tell you something," she continued, her tone shifting slightly. "People won't always believe in you. Some will doubt your abilities because of your age, your background, or even the color of your skin. That's not fair, and it shouldn't happen. But it does. The key is learning how to navigate those moments without letting them break you." He nodded slowly, thinking back to the teller's dismissive attitude earlier. "I guess I learned that the hard way today," he said with a rueful laugh. She reached across the table, placing a hand over his. Today was tough, but look at what came out of it. You stood your ground even when it felt like the whole world was against you. And when things got overwhelming, you didn't give up. That says a lot about who you are. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of conversation around them faded into the background as they simply sat there, mother and son, reconnecting in a way they hadn't in years. Years of missed calls, hurried texts, and half-hearted promises to catch up melted away, replaced by an unspoken understanding. They were on each other's side no matter what. Eventually, back at the bank, the atmosphere was tense and chaotic. The teller sat in a small meeting room with her manager, HR representative, and a senior executive who had been called in to handle the growing mess. Her hands trembled as she clutched a cup of water. Her earlier confidence completely shattered. She hadn't expected things to escalate so quickly, or for someone like her to walk in. The manager paced back and forth, his voice sharp but controlled. "Do you realize what just happened out there?" he asked, stopping to look directly at her. "That woman wasn't just any customer. She's one of the most influential business leaders in the country. And thanks to your behavior, we're now facing a public relations nightmare." The teller swallowed hard, her face pale. "I was just following protocol," she insisted weakly, though even she could hear how unconvincing it sounded. "I needed to make sure everything was legitimate." "Legitimate?" the HR representative interjected, flipping through notes on her tablet. "You held up his ID to the light like it was fake. You questioned his ability to manage finances despite having all the paperwork right in front of you. That's not protocol, that's bias, whether you meant it or not." The senior executive, a tall man with graying hair, leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. His tone was calm but firm. "Let me be clear. This isn't just about today. This is about how our institution treats people who don't fit a certain image. If we don't address this properly, it won't just cost us customers, it'll damage our reputation permanently." Meanwhile, outside the meeting room, news of the incident spread like wildfire. Someone had filmed part of the confrontation on their phone and posted it online. Within hours, social media platforms were buzzing with reactions. People shared the video, adding captions like, "Racism at its finest," and "This is why systemic change is necessary." Comments poured in from all over, some expressing outrage, others sharing their own stories of being treated unfairly by banks or other institutions. By late afternoon, local news outlets picked up the story. Reporters showed up at the bank, microphones and cameras in hand, demanding statements from management. Customers waiting in line whispered about what they'd heard, while employees exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what to say or do. In response, the bank issued an official apology, acknowledging the incident and promising to take immediate action. They announced plans to implement mandatory diversity training for all staff members and pledged to review their policies to ensure fairness and inclusivity. But everyone knew apologies weren't enough, not when trust had been broken. The young man's mom didn't stop there. After leaving the cafe, she made several calls to industry colleagues, advocacy groups, and journalists. She wasn't interested in revenge. She wanted accountability and meaningful change. By evening, she had arranged meetings with executives from other financial institutions, urging them to adopt better practices for serving marginalized communities. She also reached out to organizations that supported minority entrepreneurs, offering to partner with them to provide mentorship and funding opportunities. "We can't keep expecting people to succeed without giving them access to resources," she told a group of nonprofit leaders during a virtual conference call. "It's time we step up and create real pathways for success." Word of her efforts began to circulate, inspiring others to join the cause. A crowdfunding campaign was launched to support underrepresented entrepreneurs, raising thousands of dollars within days. Influencers and activists used their platforms to amplify the message, calling for systemic reforms in banking and beyond. For the young man, watching his mom take charge was both humbling and empowering. He saw firsthand how one person's actions could spark a movement, turning a personal grievance into a catalyst for progress. It reminded him of why he'd started his project in the first place, to help people overcome barriers and build better futures for themselves. That night, as he scrolled through social media, reading comments and seeing posts about the day's events, he felt a strange mix of emotions. There was pride in standing up for himself, pride in his mom's leadership, and pride in knowing that his experience had sparked important conversations. But there was also sadness, because he realized how many others had gone through similar situations without anyone stepping in to defend them. He decided then and there that he wouldn't let the negativity overshadow the good that had come from it. He would use this moment as fuel to push forward, to work harder, and to prove that no obstacle was insurmountable. With his mom's support and the growing wave of awareness sweeping across the community, he knew he could make a difference. As he turned off his phone and climbed into bed, he thought about the road ahead. It wouldn't be easy, but nothing worth fighting for ever was. And for the first time, he truly believed that change was possible, not just for him, but for everyone who deserved a fair shot at success. The weeks following the incident at the bank felt like a whirlwind for the young man. What had started as a humiliating encounter turned into something far bigger than he ever imagined. The video of his mom confronting the teller went viral, sparking conversations not just locally, but across the country. People from all walks of life weighed in, some sharing their own stories of discrimination, others praising his mom's boldness, and a few criticizing the bank for its handling of the situation. For him, it was overwhelming, but also deeply motivating. Every day he woke up to notifications on his phone, messages of support, interview requests, and even offers of mentorship from people he'd never met. At first, he wasn't sure how to respond. He didn't see himself as someone special or heroic. He was just a guy trying to chase his dream. But the more he read the comments and listened to people's stories, the more he realized that his experience resonated with so many others who felt unseen or undervalued. One morning, as he sat at his small desk cluttered with notes and sketches for his app, his mom called him. "How are you holding up?" she asked, her voice warm but concerned. "I'm okay," he replied honestly. "It's just a lot to process, you know. I didn't expect any of this." She laughed softly. None of us did. But sometimes, life throws these moments at you, and you have to decide what to do with them. Are you going to let it stop you, or are you going to use it to push forward? Her words stuck with him throughout the day. Pushing forward sounded simple enough, but it wasn't easy. Not when the world suddenly seemed to be watching your every move. Still, he knew she was right. This moment wasn't just about him anymore. It was about proving that resilience could turn adversity into opportunity. He threw himself into his work with renewed energy. Late nights became the norm as he fine-tuned his app's design, researched potential partners, and drafted pitches for investors. His mom checked in regularly, offering advice based on her years of experience in business. "Don't undersell yourself," she told him during one of their calls. "You've earned the right to ask for what you need. Confidence is key." Her encouragement gave him the boost he needed to reach out to some of the people who had contacted him after the incident. One of them was a tech entrepreneur who specialized in apps for social impact. They met over video chat, and within minutes the young man found himself scribbling notes furiously as the entrepreneur shared tips on user interface design, scalability, and marketing strategies. Another person who reached out was a journalist, writing an article about systemic bias in financial institutions. She interviewed him for hours, asking thoughtful questions about his goals and challenges. When the piece was published, it highlighted not only his story but also the broader issues facing minority entrepreneurs. The feedback was overwhelming. People praised his determination and expressed hope that his journey would inspire others to pursue their dreams despite obstacles. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were days when doubt crept in, whispering cruel reminders of the teller's dismissive tone or the skeptical looks from strangers. On those days, he reminded himself of the people rooting for him, the mentors offering guidance, the friends sending encouraging texts, And most importantly, his mom, who continued to stand by his side no matter what. Months passed, and slowly but surely progress began to show. He secured funding from a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting underrepresented innovators. With their backing, he hired a small team of developers and designers to bring his vision to life. Together, they worked tirelessly, testing features, gathering feedback from target users, and refining the platform until it was ready for launch. Finally, the big day arrived. The app launched quietly at first, a soft rollout aimed at a select group of communities to ensure everything ran smoothly. Within days, positive reviews poured in. Users loved the intuitive design and practical resources, and word spread quickly. Soon, local news outlets picked up the story, highlighting the app's mission to empower underserved populations. At the launch event, held in a modest community center, the young man stood nervously behind a podium, clutching a stack of index cards filled with notes. The room buzzed with excitement as attendees mingled. Community leaders, activists, journalists, and everyday people whose lives had already been touched by the app. When it was time for him to speak, he took a deep breath and looked out at the crowd. His mom sat in the front row smiling proudly. For a moment, the aftermath of the app's launch was nothing short of transformative, not just for the young man, but for the communities it aimed to serve. Within weeks, downloads surged as word spread about its practical tools and user-friendly design. People shared screenshots on social media, tagging friends and family who might benefit from the platform. Community centers hosted workshops to teach users how to navigate its features, while local leaders praised its potential to bridge gaps in access to resources. For the young man, watching this ripple effect unfold was both humbling and exhilarating. Every testimonial, every success story fueled his determination to keep improving the app. He spent hours reading feedback from users, some thanking him for helping them find affordable housing, others sharing how they'd secured jobs through the platform's job listings. Each message reminded him why he'd started this journey in the first place, to make a tangible difference. But it wasn't just the app that gained traction. The incident at the bank continued to spark conversations far beyond what anyone had anticipated. Advocacy groups used it as a case study during panel discussions about systemic bias in financial institutions. Journalists wrote follow-up pieces, highlighting the need for accountability and reform. Even schools incorporated the story into lessons about resilience, representation, and standing up against injustice. His mom played a pivotal role in amplifying these discussions. She traveled across the country, speaking at conferences, participating in interviews, and meeting with policymakers to push for changes in banking practices. Her advocacy extended beyond rhetoric. She partnered with organizations to create scholarships and grants specifically for minority entrepreneurs. "We can't wait for systems to fix themselves," she often said during her speeches. "We have to be the ones to demand better and build better." Her efforts inspired countless people, including her son. Watching her take such bold action made him realize the power of using your voice and influence to drive change. It also deepened their bond. They began spending more time together, not just talking about business strategies, but also reflecting on their shared experiences with discrimination and resilience. Those conversations weren't always easy, but they brought them closer than ever before. Meanwhile, the bank where the incident occurred scrambled to repair its damaged reputation. True to their word, they implemented diversity training programs for employees and revised their customer service policies. Posters promoting inclusivity appeared in branches, and executives publicly committed to fostering a more equitable environment. While some critics dismissed these efforts as performative, others acknowledged that real change often starts with small steps. One unexpected outcome was the support the young man received from former skeptics, including some within the banking industry. A senior executive from a rival institution reached out to congratulate him on the app's success and offered to collaborate on initiatives aimed at supporting underserved entrepreneurs. At first he hesitated, unsure if working with someone tied to the same system that had once doubted him was the right move. But after discussing it with his mom, he decided to give it a chance. "Progress isn't perfect," she reminded him. "But it's still progress." As months turned into a year, the app grew into something bigger than he'd ever imagined. It expanded to include new features like financial literacy courses, legal aid resources, and even a crowdfunding option. For community projects, schools began incorporating it into career readiness programs, and nonprofits praised it as a vital tool for empowerment. Investors took notice too, leading to additional funding rounds that allowed him to scale the platform nationwide. Despite the growing recognition, he remained grounded. Success hadn't erased the memory of that humiliating day at the bank. It had sharpened it. He carried those feelings with him, not as scars but as reminders of where he came from and how far he'd come. They fueled his commitment to ensuring no one else would face similar treatment. On the anniversary of the app's launch, he organized a celebration event at the same community center where it all began. This time the room was packed, not just with supporters but with people whose lives had been directly impacted by the app. There were single mothers who'd found stable housing, college students who'd landed internships, and retirees volunteering to mentor younger users. Their stories painted a vivid picture of hope and possibility. When it was his turn to speak, he stepped up to the podium, gripping the edges tightly as he surveyed the crowd. His mom sat in the front row again, smiling proudly, her presence a steady anchor. For a moment, he simply stood there, letting the weight of the moment sink in. Then, he began to speak. "A year ago, I walked into a bank feeling invisible," he said, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "I left, feeling defeated, but not broken. Because sometimes moments of pain lead to something greater. They remind us of our strength, our worth, and our ability to rise above." He paused, scanning the faces around him. "This app isn't mine. It belongs to everyone here. To the dreamers, the fighters, the believers. You've shown me that. When we lift each other up, anything is possible." The applause erupted before he could finish, echoing through the room like a wave of gratitude and triumph. As he stepped back, his mom joined him on stage, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. Together, they faced the cheering crowd, two individuals united by love, resilience, and a shared vision for a brighter future. In that moment, surrounded by the people whose lives he'd touched, he felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. The road ahead would still have challenges, twists, and turns, but he knew he wouldn't face them alone. With his mom by his side, a growing community behind him, and a mission driving him forward, he was ready to keep pushing boundaries and breaking barriers. Because sometimes life hands you lemons, and instead of making lemonade, you plant a whole orchard, and that orchard becomes a source of nourishment for generations to come. The months that followed the app's first anniversary were a whirlwind of growth, challenges, and moments of pure triumph. The young man had gone from being someone who doubted his place in the world to becoming a symbol of resilience and possibility, not just for himself, but for countless others who looked up to him. Every day brought new opportunities, new lessons, and new ways to make an impact. One of the biggest milestones came when a major tech conference invited him to deliver a keynote speech. It was surreal, standing on stage in front of thousands of people, many of whom worked for companies he'd once admired from afar. As he walked onto the brightly lit stage, the crowd erupted into applause. He took a deep breath, gripping the microphone stand as he scanned the sea of faces before him. "I never thought I'd be here," he began, his voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside him. "A year ago, I was sitting at home wondering if my dream was worth pursuing. Today I'm standing in front of all of you, sharing a story about how pain can become purpose." He went on to talk about the incident at the bank, the humiliation, the frustration, and the moment his mom walked in and changed everything. He didn't shy away from the raw emotions tied to that experience. Instead, he embraced them, knowing they were part of what made his journey relatable. By the time he finished speaking, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. People lined up afterward to shake his hand, share their own struggles, or simply thank him for reminding them to keep going no matter what. Back home, life continued to evolve. His mom remained deeply involved in advocacy work, using her platform to push for systemic change. She often joked that she'd become more passionate about activism than running her own company, though everyone knew she was still excelling at both. Their bond grew stronger with each passing month, and they started hosting joint events, workshops aimed at empowering young entrepreneurs, especially those from marginalized communities. These workshops quickly became a cornerstone of their shared mission. They traveled to schools, community centers, and even rural areas, meeting people whose potential had been overlooked by traditional systems. At one event, a teenage girl approached him after his presentation, clutching a notebook filled with sketches and ideas. "I want to build something too," she said shyly, her eyes shining with determination. Her words reminded him of himself at that age, full of dreams but unsure if anyone would believe in him. Without hesitation, he encouraged her to keep going, offering advice and resources to help her get started. Moments like these reinforced why he did what he did. It wasn't just about building an app. It was about creating pathways for others to follow. Of course, success didn't come without its challenges. There were days when funding fell through, technical glitches threatened to derail progress, or critics questioned whether the app could sustain its momentum. But every setback taught him something valuable: how to adapt, how to persevere, and most importantly, how to lean on the support system around him. His team, which had grown significantly over the past year, became like a second family. Late-night brainstorming sessions turned into bonding moments over pizza and laughter. Celebrating small victories together, a feature update, hitting a download milestone, receiving heartfelt feedback from users, made the hard work feel worthwhile. And then there were the users themselves, the heart and soul of the app. Their stories poured in daily, fill I.